So we'll go live as soon as they tell us that it is. We have another minute. Good. No? We ready? Well, yeah, that would be. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is Margaret Paul. I'm the city clerk for the city of Berwyn. The purpose of this meeting, as called, is to introduce representatives of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning and to have them assist us in planning for the city of Berwyn's future capital improvements. This meeting is going to be rather informal. CMAP will, I'll hand the microphone over to CMAP. They'll introduce themselves, they'll lead us through their presentation, and then there'll be questions and answers and discussion following. All right? Well, then, it is my great pleasure to introduce representatives from CMAP. Thank you for coming and helping us through this.
Awesome. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mara Campbell, who's on the machine, the laptop, and we also have a slide.
Microphone, because people will.
I think they got a mic.
No, you can't carry a mic. No, I'll give you another. There, hold the mic.
All right, well, Tommy, thank you, and welcome everybody. We are very excited that you're here tonight to really give us your thoughts and inputs on this capital improvement plan that we've created for the city of Berwyn. We are super excited you made it tonight, so thank you so much. Our agenda is pretty short, but we thought it would be important to go over a few things. On the next slide, you'll see that agenda, which is why we're here today, who we are, what is the capital improvement plan, a little overview about CMAP, the process that we use to identify these projects, and then an overview of those projects. And then we'll give you a quick summary of what the next steps will be in the process. And then, of course, the most important part for tonight is then for you to kind of interact with the folks there in the room and give us your thoughts and feedback. Did we get the right projects? Are there things that we've forgotten? And give us your opinions and those types of things. So thanks again for being here. So very quickly, in general, why are we here tonight? We are here really for three objectives. One is to provide an overview of the capital improvement plan process. And you can see these objectives right there on the screen. And this process is really how we prioritized the projects that you'll be seeing tonight. The second objective is to obtain, as I mentioned earlier, your feedback about these capital improvement projects. And then lastly, we want to hear from you if there are additional capital improvement projects that you want to see included in this plan. So those are our three objectives for this evening's public hearing. So tell us what you think. There are folks in the room that would love to chat with you more. We would really appreciate you filling out a public comment form tonight and giving us your written feedback and thoughts. We would also appreciate you taking the survey. All you have to do is just scan that QR code and it'll pick up a survey. And that, again, helps us better understand what you want and what do you want to see in this this capital improvement plan. Real quickly, wanted to share with you who we are. So with you in the room tonight is Cole from CMAP, Tommy and Connor and Jerome are from Jacobs Engineering Group, And then Nicole Campbell, of course, is the city engineer there with the city of Berwyn. And then virtually, you have myself, Mary Campbell. I'm also with Jacobs. I have 3 other colleagues with Jacobs Engineering Group, 2 subject matter experts that are capital improvement plan experts, and that's Darren and Brian. And then Irie is our stakeholder engagement specialist at Jacobs. So that's who we are. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Darren to let him share with you what is a capital improvement plan. Darren, over to you.
Thanks, Mara. I appreciate it. So this evening I'm going to run through just a couple of slides explaining what a capital improvement plan is. At its most basic level, a CIP is a multi-year, fiscally constrained to-do list of projects over a very well-defined period of time, in this case 5 years. Because we always have more needs than we have money, a capital improvement plan is a transparent and predictable way to plan for and execute on relatively large and complex projects, projects that sometimes require multiple fiscal years to build and or fund. Right on the slide, what you see is a schematic showing the process that we use, or that we used in this case to develop the capital improvement plan. It's a fairly standard urban type planning process, and we use it all the time. One of the distinguishing features of CIP planning is step 6 that you see there on the right, which is the prioritization process, helping us decide which projects to tackle first. And Brian's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of slides. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about what characterizes a capital project. The good news is that the jurisdiction gets to define this for themselves. In your case, the village has defined a capital project as a one-time expenditure that is greater than $20,000 for investments or $5,000 for maintenance projects. Both types of projects are characterized by their permanence and their long-term usefulness, typically greater than 20 years for investments and greater than 5 years for long-term maintenance projects. My next slide will talk about what examples of capital improvement projects. And the takeaway here is that capital projects don't include the normal day-to-day operation and maintenance of existing facilities unless they hit that $5,000 threshold and long-term usefulness. Typically, though, they result in the purchase, construction, or replacement of physical facilities. Some examples that you see here on the slide include buildings, equipment, and facilities. This evening, we're focused on transportation facilities such as roads and sidewalks and other things that happen within the public right-of-way. At this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to my colleague, I believe. Do we have Tommy on the next one, or is it Jerome? Whoever's next, take it away.
I think it's Cole.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Cole.
All good. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out this evening. My name's Cole Nieder. I'm an assistant planner with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And I'm just going to give a real quick program overview of what funds this capital improvement project through CMAP and kind of what CMAP is as well. So this CIP is funded through CMAP's Local Technical Assistance Program, which aims to build capacities in the 284 communities and 7 counties that we serve in the northeastern region of Illinois. And in this case, our funding is directed at Berwyn's capacity to develop and then implement a capital improvement program. And in addition to that, we want that built capacity to last after we leave a municipality or the project is done within the municipality. So we're also focusing on practices or best practices for data collection, grant readiness, and then the use of performance and project prioritization measures as well. And next slide. Thank you. So overall, our objectives for this project are to, of course, develop the multi-year capital improvement program that we are talking about today. And then in doing so, this can provide the city and their partners with a snapshot of the current and future needs of the municipality that they can address going forward. In addition, this also implements the On to 2050 comprehensive regional plan that CMAP has. And that includes building resiliency through infrastructure planning and then inclusive growth and prioritizing investment through capital planning. And then on the slide right here, if you guys look, This is a good timeline. We are at the public hearing currently, and then the presentation to City Council will be on the 14th. So we appreciate you guys' input this evening on the CIP, and we're looking forward to what you guys have to say as well. Thank you. And I don't know who I'm passing it off to either, so.
Brian.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I just want to talk about how we take these capital projects and be able to look at them and prioritize them and understand what's the most critical things that help to take it forward and putting them in a prioritization. As Darren said, step 6, establishing that project priority. That's what I'm talking about here. And as a community, the decision was these top 6 evaluation criteria is public health and safety, economic development, environmental sustainability, identification in a city plan, federal or state mandates, and stakeholder support. So there's also an opportunity if you think there's other ones that you would like as well to be considered, and then taking a look at these and deciding, which ones you feel like are the most important. And what it happens is we take these criterias and we put weights to them, and then we also score them. So then it comes out with a good weighted score. And if we look at the next slide, that will give us the, I'm sorry, I thought we had that in there. It's basically a graph of, you'll be able to take a graph and show based on, the survey and things like that. It'll help prioritize of which projects, we believe are, the most important. And so I'll turn it over to Jerome, and I believe he's going to cover the specific projects for transportation.
The graph that Brian was talking about is the second from the left here. So if you want to take a look at that after we wrap up the PowerPoint, we can answer some questions. So we talked a lot about prioritizing projects, right? What kind of projects are we talking about? So there's a nice list here of different project types. Everything from bike-friendly infrastructure projects, so bike lanes or protected bike lanes, all the way to beautification projects to make your city look, just more attractive. And it ranges all the way down to stuff like improving traffic, not traffic stops, bus shelters. So there's a whole variety of items here, which we'll kind of expand on a little bit more in the next few slides. So we're going to start to get into some of the feedback that we got over the last maybe 2.5 weeks or so since we made the survey go live online. So you can kind of see here what you and your neighbors and fellow residents have identified as being important to you. So one very encouraging thing that we should applaud you guys for is we had over 350 comments. That is not very common. Usually, even in municipalities or agencies with around 55,000 residents, 350 is not typical. So thank you for that. So the results, what do we see? Roadway improvements, everybody has a disdain for potholes, roads that don't seem to work well. Beautification projects came in second. And then you can see the third and the fifth are those kind of vulnerable user types of projects of pedestrians and bicyclists, creating better infrastructure, more facilities for them to give the feeling of a more complete street. And then the fourth one is intersection improvements. So that kind of goes hand in hand with roadway improvements. So where should those prioritized projects be focused at? This is a little general, there aren't necessarily street names that we were going to attempt to collect because it get really diluted in all the different streets within the city. But in general, you can see the #1 area was identified for the worst existing infrastructure. And then not far behind in a close second is just deploying these types of improvements evenly throughout the entire city of Berwyn. So this is another graphic that Brian was alluding to a couple minutes ago. How do we prioritize these? So we've got that list of 6 here on the left of those different criteria, and each of those have been weighted in terms of the importance to the city of Berwyn. Last fall, I believe it was, there were some additional workshops where the weighting criteria for these 6 topics were decided. That could be something in the future that if opinions change, those weights could also change too. So just because you see this now for the 2022 effort doesn't mean it's set in stone. It can be, adjusted based on your voices. So you can see the number one most desired first choice in terms of what should be the biggest impact to a project being prioritized is how it affects public health and safety. And that's considerably bigger than the second most desired, which is economic development. In our next slide, we're kind of giving a little bit of a visual of where projects are planned for. And keep in mind, this is infrastructure and non-infrastructure related. So there's a project here along CMAP that goes the entire width of the city. Same story here on Ogden. They're doing some infrastructure improvements, some streetscape improvements as well. And then we got a couple icons here for fire, police, the rec center. The books are for the library, the city hall, for just more of like a general needs type project. So, for example, next slides give us a couple visuals. So just, I think there were a couple we saw on our inventory list of improving the break room at City Hall, or a building that needs new roofing, or a building that might need an improved handicap wheelchair ramp up to the entrance to the building. All the way down to something like a street sign program where we'd like to satisfy the requirements that are in the manual that many civil engineers use, called the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. I gotta say that one out. MUTCD. So improving those signage and the reflectivity of those signs, all the way down to sewer rehabilitation projects where we just improve the conveyance of the wastewater to the wastewater plants. Again, here, improving potholes, one of the items that falls into the street rehab program. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but the city also has a sidewalk cost share program to where if the condition of the sidewalk is not up to satisfactory conditions, the resident and the city share the cost of replacing that sidewalk. And then we start to get into some of the other equipment type projects where, the jaws of life could be something that the fire department is looking to replace if it's considerably aged, all the way down to the apparatus that the firemen wear into fires. We'd like to have them be safe and have the most up-to-date equipment, right? So, I guess we could open the floor real quick. Are there any specific projects that you think might have been missed, or something that sticks in your mind that wouldn't really fall into one of those general categories?
Yeah, I got just one. The alleys around our house are terrible. I don't know if they come to the street. They're gonna fix those. It's Crown.
Yes.
All the water runs to the garages, runs down our driveway in the wintertime, cruises up.
Yep, there is, I believe, an alleyway project as well on the inventory list. I don't think I have a reason for why I didn't include it in this particular slide, but I had 7 or 8 examples here, and the list is 46 long. So I didn't think we needed to spin our wheels too much, given examples of all the different line items. But yes, that is one of the lines on the inventory.
Coming here today, came out of the garage through the alley. And especially our alley, a lot of the others aren't so bad, we've got some ditch. But the 2300 lot one we have, which is water in the middle, it's like our lake in the middle of the alley.
Is it close to Clinton?
Huh?
Close to Clinton? Yes.
Between home avenue, it's terrible.
Close to Clinton.
Too late. Sorry.
I just have 2 questions. What is the budget for this? Is there an overall budget?
So there's multiple different funding/grant opportunities depending on multiple different funding opportunities and grants that can be applied for depending on the type of project. So I know there are a handful of, let's say for example that the city wanted to implement bike lanes. There are some different sources through IDOT, federal money. Cole might be able to speak a little bit more on some other funding opportunities, but project dependent, I should say, the grants and the awards are project dependent based on the types of features that that project has. So I think the city's got 18 or 19 million in the, is that right? 18 or 19 million in the annual cycle, but that's including 40-some projects on the 5-year outlook funded project list.
I can take that as well. So this is out of your general fund budget that you make capital improvements for, that money that you guys already have. But having a CIP also allows you to forecast and budget into the future. And so for multi-year projects that require different sources of grant funding, it opens you up for additional opportunities from the state and federal government as well. So you actually are more likely to get additional funding for your wanted infrastructure improvements by having one of these.
I just want to clarify, are these projects that are already, that were carried over from previous CIPs that you're showing, that you showed here, or is this what we're planning? And that's the extent of the public health and safety that we talked about?
So I've seen the 2017 to 2021 CIP that was performed, I think it was back in 2016. Off the top of my head, I don't recall if any of those projects have translated over to this new list that we have. But I would imagine some carry over, some might take 5 or 6 years to complete. So there could be some overlap for sure, but I don't know exactly if there was something coming from the 2017 to 2021 plan onto this year's effort.
Okay, because I know Ogden was on there, CMAP was on there. There are things that are marked as completed that are not completed in the previous one. And I know we've talked about the crosswalk at the library, and that, and I get that you didn't include every single item, but I know for a fact there are a lot of things that were given to you that you're not talking about, and the fact that they're not being even pointed out at a high level here is problematic, in my view.
Okay, and you're saying the things that haven't been completed from the prior?
Correct.
Okay.
The Riverside sidewalk improvement was supposed to include a sidewalk side on the north side of that train line. It doesn't exist, so currently pedestrians have to walk 3 extra intersections to be able to cross. If they don't know that there's no crossing there, for example, a person in a wheelchair who comes down the way and doesn't know it, they're forced into a blind corner to cross using an alley in somebody's random driveway to go across the train tracks to then come back across. I know we're looking at doing a lighted, protected, blinker beg button to get across, but that doesn't change the fact that we need a crosswalk on the north side of the train tracks, period, full stop. And that was promised, put into the previous thing. All of the other sidewalks were done. That wasn't done.
So unfortunately,
But
we weren't involved.
Completed.
That was in the previous CIP, but based on approvals from the railroad, we cannot encroach upon that. We have to stay within so many feet, and we could not get that through. So whether we include that in future CIPs to work with the railroad and find out what they will approve and not approve, that may be the case. It's not necessarily it was promised, it's what we want to do, but when you have to work with outside agencies, sometimes they say no.
Right, but putting it down as completed as opposed to putting on there, this part was unable to be completed, the rest of it was completed, gives better transparency and clarity to the community that we were unable to achieve the networking and socialization and communication with an organization to successfully give the community what they need to protect their high school students. Because right now we have a rape tunnel and we have a lack of a crosswalk that is controlled by the train station or by the train line that I'm told flat out, well, nobody, just don't use it. And that's not acceptable when we have people we named streets after handicapped individuals who are in wheelchairs, but they can't get across the train tracks. If there's a train, they can't use the underground tunnel. I'm not sending any young woman under that tunnel on her way to school or back after high school at night. So these are things that the community repeatedly says they want. And like, I would expect that leadership's job is to do the networking and do the work to make it happen.
Well, that's the purpose of this meeting, is to
Right.
get community feedback. With the survey, you know, we're trying to get feedback.
I understand, but if Mark thinks it's completed, then the community thinks they're done, unless people have really, really tight eyes on it. And right now, what's happening is the community is having to pay. The reason you got 300 responses is the community is learning that the leadership is not being transparent, and we are focusing it to better communicate with you what we need.
We did have 800 responses for previous. No, I'm saying this is our second one, but in previous efforts, we've had 800. I think we probably get a lot of responses in our surveys, usually in the actually this was a low one, because our previous one was 800.
That's quite impressive, honestly. That's and also just to kind of gear this back towards the actual capital improvement plan itself as well. This is to promote additional clarity and to show the public and to clarify with the public the process the different projects go through and the timing that they go through as well. As she was referring to earlier, there can be issues with right-of-way acquisition and different phases of projects. So something in one phase may have been completed, the second phase of that project may not have. So we can look over that again as well as part of the plan, and we'll clarify those things, but that's the whole point of this document in the first place.
And are we going to have access to the complete list, not just a high-level overview of things, since you mentioned that there are a lot of things on the list that aren't on here?
I think that'll probably be a you question.
Well, when the capital improvement plan is adopted, it'll be posted online, just
Yep.
like the past
So
ones.
we're not going to see the proposed, we're only going to see the final approved.
So I believe a draft of that can be made available. Possible.
I'm just curious, I mean, this is totally new, I saw it on the city Instagram. Thank you.
I just saw this on Instagram, I think last week or whatever, and so I'm like, oh, I'm coming here, I don't really know what to expect. And when you were saying, like, you know, like, put some thoughts down, I'm like, I think to me it would be really interesting if there's 50 projects, there's probably some, you know, most of the things already addressed or whatever, or give you an idea what's even possible. And that, like, seeing a list might help, you know, to provide some other input. To me, it would anyway, because this is super abstract.
Yeah.
To me, just being like a homeowner here, you know, so.
That's totally understandable, and that's kind of, you know, to kind of gear this towards the overall schedule and agenda of what we had today as well. We have multiple posters and more you know, kind of an informational session where you guys can informally come up and ask us questions as well about specific different projects, and then we can have the information on hand to kind of tell you that. The whole point of the higher level overview was just to kind of, it's exactly that, to give you guys an overview and kind of a topical point of context as to what we're doing here. So if you guys have specific questions and everything like that, that's definitely what this public meeting is for.
No, it just almost seemed like it's like upsetting to ask for the list, and I'm like, I mean,
Not
everybody's
at all.
doing their job, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I know, but you know, it shouldn't be a confrontational situation. It should be, you know, just info sharing. So.
Most definitely, and if you see us looking at each other when you guys are asking for the list and things like that, it's mainly because of the timeline that we're adhering by as well, and the process and the fact that the CIP is not, it's definitely not done yet. We're not finished it, and that's why we're having this meeting today. So that's why we wanted to gather your guys' input in the first place as well.
So would the CIP include projects as far as in the fourth ward? There's been 2 recent demolitions of the large areas by where the medical records location was, as well as the docks that line the BNSF. Would that include what that area is going to be repurposed to be in the future?
It might. There's maybe 10 or so columns. Oh, what's that? All right. They said it's private property, so that's, I'm guessing, out of the city's.
I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. I can tell you what's going on there, but it's not public property, so it's not. Yeah, no, I'll be happy to let you know what's going on, but it's not public property, so it's not part of our land. We're not spending anything on it.
That is actually a really good point to note as well, is that this is all projects under the jurisdiction of the city of Berwyn. And so like he said, with private property and different people who have jurisdiction over a different right-of-way and things like that, those projects generally are not included in a CIP. We have a couple state-level, state-owned roads that we want to put in there as well, because Berwyn can have influence over when those roads are improved. But that would be the extent of what a CIP goes for.
Hey, Tommy and Jerome, we just wanted to ask if there were any questions of us, and because if not, we will let you all have continue with your good conversation there in person. So, do you need anything from us? Any questions for us?
I think we can probably have the interactive poster session now. So if you guys wanted to drop off, Cole and I and Jerome and Connor can probably take it from here. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you guys, and thanks for coming out tonight, and we appreciate your input. So have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Mara. So yeah, I think with the rest of the night, if you wanted to take a look at the posters, I can give you a quick recap on what you're looking at.
Let's just, is there any, for just like a point of order question too, and for everybody online, is there any other questions that you guys want answered here in this setting? Or we can go to the more informal version as well. Yes.
Can additional items be added to the list currently?
So yes, can additional items be added to the list currently? Yes. So that's part of the point of why we're having this public meeting, to see if we missed anything. Because, of course, what everybody's perspective up here is going to be a little bit different from the community members. And so that's the point of having a public meeting is here. So yes, we welcome those. And I think we have sheets over here where you can write those down. You can talk directly with us as well. We welcome that.
Yeah. We were planning to close it tonight, but just we might give an extra day. Tomorrow around 5 or 6, we might close it out because then we'll start on trying to summarize all that so we can include it in the CIP itself to show that we had a public outreach effort. Like Cole mentioned before, showing that you had a public outreach effort gives you more points on some grant opportunities. So including that piece to show that we had a public event in the City Hall and a virtual event last week we had. It's just more, points that you can potentially gain from the evaluation process.
I was going to comment and say that based on his question, then I think it makes sense for both women that spoke that information be made available to us so that we know, because I think as residents, it's kind of hard to look at the whole city. We're more of like the scope of our block, a couple of blocks around us, half a mile each way, whatever, to understand what's, what we pass driving. So then I think it's important to understand what the 47, 46 items that you said are being, looked at so that we know and have an idea versus just trying to come up with something in our head.
Maybe not so much kind of a question. So for public safety, that is like, street intersections, like lights, no potholes, like that accidents don't happen, things like that, right? Just out of curiosity, do like 3D painted, this is a personal preference, 3D painted crosswalks fall into that? Like I'm in the public arts, and so I've seen like things where for safety, instead of like just doing standardized, the white crossroads, doing some other kind of, optical illusion type of art pieces.
I've seen some of those where it looks like they're elevated. Right?
Yes, or like they're to slow down traffic, like, or at intersections at like on the street, there's like some kind of graphic that it almost looks like it gets tighter, and so people are kind of reacting and slowing down, but it also enhances like your environment in a very creative and cool way, while serving a purpose.
I've seen those. I've never been involved in a project that actually implemented it. Most of the projects that I work on in Illinois really try to push the high visibility crosswalks, other than just the standard transverse lines that are essentially 5 or 6 feet apart, going from curb across the street to other curb. But I've never seen one in Chicagoland go in that's more artsy with, like you said, the 3D or the visual trickiness to it. But the high visibility, some companies call them zebra stripes, others call them piano bars. Something that's better than just the standard is definitely something that's very cheap and relatively straightforward and easy to implement into like a repaving project or something like that. But as far as the actual art crosswalks, I haven't seen that yet in Chicagoland area.
No, I have seen them personally. I've only seen them, you know, online and stuff, but I'm just wondering if these kind of things can be considered in a process like this. I know it's not like number one because it's usually very utilitarian, these kind of things, but I'm just like expanding because beautification is one of the things that apparently was like, attractive to people, and that kind of falls into the category too. I understand that it might comes across as a little bit like, ooh, this is, hooty tooty, but, I just think there might be some things that just are practical and functional and beautiful.
So as the project that you described, this would serve as somewhat of like a line item for a specific project then within the CIP, and then the estimated cost that it would account for. The actual design of the actual crosswalk, that would be something you want to discuss with your specific city officials. If you have a specific location that you want to put that in, that's to discuss when the project has actually come up for the design portion of it. In the actual CIP, that would be going into a little bit of additional detail than what we usually do within the scope of work within that document.
When does that happen, as far as knowing which projects are coming up first and second?
So that's part of the project prioritization process that you want, and then your city officials will be looking to how to fund those projects, and then what money, like such grant money, is available. Now, the way grants revolve and the timeline on those projects may not be done in the exact order that they are prioritized. The whole entire point of the CIP is to forecast out, to have a plan, and try to adhere to that as best as possible. I hope that answers your question. Okay, good.
Really quick, I was going to say, with that, then with the survey, the people who completed, the residents that completed the survey, then is that we're just giving input on what we think we want to happen, and then with whatever was 1, 2, and 3, and whatever's on that list of 46 items is like what's picked, like we're just giving input, but the city ultimately decides, or it's, you know what I mean, kind of a resident and city collaboration, or how does that?
That's a fluid situation, and that's part of what this document does as well, is it opens up that line of communication then between you and your city officials in order to try to better prioritize projects that meet community needs. Now, is that process going to be absolutely perfect every time? Probably not. The city has to adhere to a process that is budget friendly for them and to their existing processes as well. But that input is vital, and it has made a difference in this CIP as well. You see the numerous projects that we have, and we've also implemented additional projects from the survey already too. So that does make a difference, and that's why we keep coming back and asking for that input, is because that does matter.
Okay, thank you.
Along the lines of beautification, one of the things I appreciate when I go through other suburbs is that they're very good with their signage. They have plaques. They have larger signs highlighting head this way if you're looking for this. We are sorely lacking with that, so I would love to see money put towards more signage throughout Berwyn. In a particular way, we're spending a whole ton of money on the Depot District right now, and I'm thinking at the Gateway at Harlem and Windsor and Stanley, there needs to be some significant signage calling attention to this massive project. And for a long time, Berwyn was known for the cars on a spindle, at Harlem and CMAP. I think we could use the value of another new landmark symbol, and I'm suggesting if there's funds available, that some sort of a clock tower be put next to the depot at Oak Park and Windsor that would provide local pride, meet you under the clock. If it could be a chiming or musical tower as well. I think we need a strong anchor in that area to attract business and to attract visitors. So I would like to find out if that's possible, that money be earmarked for that. And my last issue is whatever beautification is being done throughout this project, our local ability to support that beautification is not very good. Our ability to keep planters and shrubs looking like the way they should is not had a track record. So I'm wondering, is there money that can be built in to this project or this funding to bring outside people that would be responsible for maintaining whatever money is spent in putting in the planters and the shrubs and the flowers?
Most definitely. So when you see especially on the different documents and on your ongoing projects, when you see streetscape improvements or gateway or wayfinding signage, that is generally what those improvements that you're referring to, that is included within an actual roadway project. So those are by project, definitely something that you can discuss with your city officials as well as those projects come up. Keep in mind too, when you're referring to signs like on public property and even public property and then especially private property, that's generally your local sign ordinance as well.
I meant things like, the significance of, there's a little bit of it on Ogden, the famous Route 66, but along Archer, identifying how do you get to City Hall, where's the post office, those kind of signage that you see in other suburbs. They tell you, go this way to see this, go this way to get to that. We don't have that in Berwyn. I'd like to see more of that because it really helps people locate where they want to go and stirs up with them, oh, what is that? I want to go check that out. We need more of that kind of energy.
And I guess I should have clarified the term. So that is, what you're describing is wayfinding signage for initiatives like that, whether it's a program where you're putting that citywide or it's for a specific project. That's definitely something, the point of why we're having this meeting in the first place too. So I will talk to you and we can write that down as well.
I'd just like to piggyback on a comment you made. In terms of, I don't know if it was part of any other CIP plan, but for maintaining planters and such, if there was anything in the budget, they're a mess. They're not maintained. There's nothing in them but weeds and overgrown plants. Because I've looked at them on Roosevelt, CMAP, and Ogden, and they're a mess. So I'm hoping in the future that there will be some effort to maintain those.
Definitely, yeah. And so whether or not, and I may misspeak, whether or not the Parks Department is a separate district or not, I'm not sure about that off the top of my head. That might be under their jurisdiction and maintenance as well. But if it's not, then that's something that we can speak to you guys about and write down as well.
Would planters be considered a capital improvement project item, or would that be part of the design?
It depends on what it's included in an existing project. Like I was saying, if it's a roadway improvement project and that is part of the design of that improvement project, then yes, definitely. Planters alone, generally that is not going to hit the threshold for doing that. Sorry, I should have clarified that in the first place too.
Well, but I mean, I thought the beautification project, the minimum was $5,000 for a project. Isn't that what you said at the outset?
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. So if it's budgeted over that,
Beautification project would be at least $5,000. So it would seem to fall within.
it depends. Yeah, it can depend on the specific project and then where you're allocating your budget to as well.
I mean, I know that the planters are not, when I see stuff, is not super great, but I'm like, I believe they're put out by the city, right? Like planters on Roosevelt and Cermak, the ones that are on the medians. Is that from the city or from like, yeah? Okay, okay. I was just, because I mean, the trouble is, of course, you like put them out and then like, they're not filled, and that's when you notice stuff, right? That's like the worry. So I've seen.
You would expect that they'd be maintained. If you're going to build them,
No, I know, but I'm like, it is up to.
then you see stuff that's overgrown, weeds.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more like, if you don't have a budget to maintain, then if there's a way of like covering them. I've been in cities where they just like have some structures like that and they just have like a lid or something so you don't have weeds growing in them, just at least to have that solved, Yeah.
That doesn't cost a whole lot. Get it. I know. But if you don't know where to get it.
Okay, guys. Well, if that is all the questions for the whole of the group here, we want to talk to you guys in more specific details. I know you guys have a lot of ideas for projects.
Before we go, I think we should be able to know when and where we can get a copy of that list of projects before it's voted on.
Most definitely. So again, that is on the 14th, and we can iron that out, and we will let everybody know ahead of time what we can do with that as well.
What?
This month. Yes. Yes.
So we're going to get that out to us in less than 6 days.
Yes. So if there is not an ample amount of time to review it, then we can revisit that council date as well. Yeah, public hearing, yes.
That's where the city council will vote.
Yes. My apologies. Yes.
That's not your issue. It's really our local government repeatedly does this. We get these notifications days or a week before. It's really hard to feel. That's when we're talking about visibility. That's not on you. That's on our local officials. But we're here to air that, and there are people here from the local government that have been hearing this for a while, and it hasn't changed.
Well,
So the fact that the 14th is coming up and we still haven't received that list, very frustrating. That's not your problem, that's their problem, and it's our problem. And
So-
it's frustrating.
So part of the reason, and I can explain this as well too, because the funding from this specific project comes from my agency, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Our fiscal year ends at the end of this month. And so we need to exhaust the funds by the end of the fiscal year, thus the quick timeline for this. So this isn't something that people are, going up above everybody's head. The quick timeline is simply because at the end of the month, we are not able to use those funds anymore. This is of no cost to the taxpayers of Berwyn or any of the city, the city of Berwyn as well. That's why this project is fully funded by that grant money. Unfortunately, we do have to adhere to that timeline. Now, there's certain aspects of it and ways around that. So if everybody, if there is a lot of people frustrated with that, there are ways we can work around that as well. But this is why we're trying to adhere to that quick timeline as well.
And another thing is like Cole was mentioning, the end of their fiscal years, end of this month. CIPs are in general live documents. Just because it's voted on by the city council at the end of next week, if they accept it, doesn't mean that it's set in stone at all. The projects can be, as one project is completed, it can be replaced with another. So there is the ability to have your voice heard and say, this is a project that many of the residents, many of my neighbors or my kids' parents, or kids' students' parents are attracted to. So those projects can kind of be that revolving door type thing to where new projects can come on the list. So just because the city council is voting on it next week doesn't mean that list is set in stone for the next year.
Just going back to what you mentioned, that this is money that has to be used. When did Berwyn become aware of the fact that there was this deadline? When did you first approach them and say, we have X amount of dollars that we can spend? When was that?
As soon as those funds were made available to
And when
CMAP.
was that?
That was about, right at it was about 3-4 weeks before the beginning of the project,
And what
actually.
was the beginning of the process?
One thing too to clear up, it's not like Cole's agency gave a truckload of money to Berwyn to spend on projects. This is strictly a consulting project to prioritize the list and get the CIP ready so that in the future, the city team can perform this process on their own. And we're trying to kind of help act as an extension of them to give them the knowledge based on the CIPs that we've done in the past so that they can take this and kind of have this autonomy every year to visit this process, evaluate what happened in the past year, refresh the list with new projects, and continually do that annually. But there was not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was not a check signed to the city to use on infrastructure, to use on beautification, to use on bike lanes. The agreement between CMAP and the city was essentially this learning process. So it wasn't intended for any roadway beautification projects or anything, any of the examples that we had up here.
I'm not
I can't
sure
speak
how
for
to,
the city.
yeah, I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question. We are in, a public forum now and taking comments for specific projects like this as well. This is the whole point of these kind of platforms. And I got to remind you guys too, this is the entire point of the document itself, is to facilitate those conversations over what projects you guys want to see in your community.
So I think the one thing that just really needs to be articulated, and my hope is that city leaders, all of our aldermen, our mayor, hears this. I don't think anyone wants a vote on Tuesday if we don't see the list with sufficient amount of time for us to at least voice to you what is okay or not, because, and again, this isn't your fault. The city puts it out in the agenda on Friday. The residents of the city scramble in their daily lives to try and figure out what they're talking about, what acronyms are, what hidden in information is. And then we get to council, and it is already known that if it comes up on the agenda, it is approved by enough people who have a vote, it will go through. And that is the problem that is being articulated here. The residents want to see the list before it gets voted on, so we have a chance to affect and communicate with our alders and our city leadership to say, this is not something that we are, I'm not saying the entire plan, I'm saying if we see something like a $2.5 million parking lot for a police station, we are not okay with it. And this is what you're unfortunately walking into, but this is what the city decided to spend money on when everybody in this community has begged for 15 years for a pool to be fixed. Not your fault, but this is the scenario that we're in, and we're trying to prevent. We need to see the list so we can be very clear with our aldermen what our wants are. If we are okay with things, no problem. But if there is a red flag for us, we need to be able to articulate that, and we haven't been able to up until now. So I'm going to guess that this list is probably going to, the draft is going to be available Friday for us all to scramble and try and figure out what every single thing means. Is that probably, and that's not your fault. But I'm guessing that's the reality if that's going to be on the agenda. Is that correct?
I don't have a specific timeline on when those specific projects can be made available. Given your guys' comments, we can definitely make an effort to coordinate and get that list out sooner so that there can be more comments on it. We can definitely leave the survey open as well and kind of revise those questions in a manner that if you did already look through those available projects and have comments on them, you can definitely do as such as well. So we will definitely coordinate between Jacobs, myself, and the city as well to make sure that you guys have ample amount of time to review that.
How do we get in contact with you?
I'll give you my card.
Thank you.
I recently went to a third ward meeting, and the city administrator was there, and she was talking about the money that Berwyn had received from the rescue plan and how it was allocated to certain projects. Are these projects also still in here, or are those like the separate ones? Or separate? Okay, I was just curious because that included a lot of like infrastructure, like main lines and stuff like that. So I was just curious. Okay, thank you. I could have just asked. No, it's okay.
So definitely, I know you guys have a lot more comments, or I'm at least assuming so. We welcome you guys to just come on up, take a look at the content that we have here. Please write down projects that you guys want prioritized within the CIP for your community. And if you guys have any questions for us, if you guys want our business cards or anything like that, please talk to us as well.
And just to give you a quick,
That's a very good point. Yes, please give us your contact information as well, and we want to get that information to you guys as soon as possible. We can also take the initiative to do that as well. So please put your email and your contact information. Thank you.
so the posters over here on the left, real quick, that is a summary of some of the different questions we asked on the survey. So you can see how other residents responded to the same questions you might have responded to. The one with the pie chart is showing the different weights and criteria that are used to prioritize projects. The one second from the right is the 8-step process in order to produce a CIP. And then the one on the right is one that was included in the slideshow where it shows the location of projects.
Thanks for running around. Appreciate it.